Hello and welcome everybody to, according to Andrew, number 50, The Prince versus the Discourses, the different perspectives of Nicolo Machiavelli. So I've been reading the Discourses. I'm not done yet, but I think I've read enough to kind of get a sense on the direction the book's going and stuff like that. And I'll probably, I want to talk about these books a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of give this as like a primer video for some of the other discussions that we're going to have later down the line. Um, about kind of how these books compare and contrast, and I think they're very interesting uh, in how this one guy is able to kind of take these kind of diametrically opposed viewpoints and still write about them in a very convincing manner. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So, for those of you not aware, Niccolo Machiavelli was um, I guess, philosopher person concerned with statecraft in the 1400s, around the time of the Medici family. He wrote The Prince to get or on the side of the Medici family. It was basically kind of like a resume, if you were a cover letter kind of thing, to say, hey, this is why you should hire me for your statecraft. Um, and it's not very long. It's about 60 pages. Um, Compared to the Discourses, which is somewhere around 300 or so. Um, it's much longer. Uh, well, not much longer, but it's notably longer than the Prince. So that was kind of interesting right there. And so the different kind of perspectives that you come at it from here is the Prince is it's stuff that's directed at a prince, right? So it's how do you're a prince, how do you run a state, how do you maintain power, how do you get that stuff done? Um, it's uh, it concerns itself with gaining and maintaining power. Um, Let me see. I wrote stuff about this. And That's basically the premise of it. Whereas the sweetness of power is more about gaining and maintaining freedoms, right? What institutions and other important aspects of society do you need to have a free society? And what are those things that allow that to happen? Oh, wrong thing. Um, so those are kind of like the two viewpoints that he goes at with the Discourses versus the Prince. And I think it's kind of notable that he was able to describe all the things that a prince needs to be able to do to gain and maintain power within 60 pages, and the route to gaining and maintaining freedom takes about 300. So that's rather interesting. He is definitely somebody that believes in an elite, kind of somebody that he's a little reminiscent of is Tucker Carlson in that regard, right? So, um, Tucker Carlson has that phrase. He's like, I don't mind having an elite. I just want them to be elite. Uh, Nobility, same basic premise. Uh, and I would say Machiavelli kind of shares that viewpoint of the people that are running society should be the nobles and stuff like that. And these people are the people that are best suited to this kind of work. They're the best statecraft type people. And he doesn't have a problem with, an average Joe kind of person, if they happen to be suited for that, having their family rise up. But he kind of believes in like the legacy and the long term families. He's very much he's from Florence, and so he's very much into Rome and the Roman style of doing things, and the great families of Rome heavily influence and inspire his way of thinking and his thought process of, like, you had these families. They were, sometimes they're degenerate and stuff like that, and they had their problems and things, definitely, especially towards the end of the Republic, had their issues, but um, overall they were able to maintain a very uh, strong, cohesive system of government uh, through this goal and desire of greatness that they had. So, but there's a lot that can be learned from these two books, and I'm going to kind of just pull some of the stuff that I've been able to pick up from these books. We've discussed some of the lessons from the Discourses in previous um, episodes, uh, but it's when you're thinking about how to structure a state and government and stuff like that, I find it hard to say that there's nobody better to read than Nicolo Machiavelli. He really kind of touches on all the little things and all the little, not cultural, but personal touches that kind of go into something. Um, a good example would be looking at some of these titles. Uh, he titles his chapters very clearly concerning new principalities which are acquired either by arms or by good fortune, and the issues there. He talks about the issues of mercenaries and how you kind of have this continuous battle between uh, wanting to hire mercenaries because they're loyal to you, kind of thing, versus hiring the populace that could then be trained to be able to rise up against you. But mercenaries are a fickle thing, and they're only as good as their dollar, and they aren't going to uh, defend your town or your home the way that the people would. And if you have the people on your side and they they see you as kind of one of their own, they want to defend their nation and their their kingdom as much as they want to. That plays into your hand because that means that they're effectively defending your setup and your power along with that. And so the prince is where they get the term Machiavellian from, and it's very kind of cutthroat because it only concerns itself with how to get power, how to maintain power, and what to do once you have it, how to get it, kind of thing. And it can be very ruthless. He talks about acquiring a principality through wicked means by backstabbing people and stuff like that, and it's very interesting. So. Um, some of the lessons that we can pull from this. So these are mainly going to come from the prince because it's what I've gone over this morning. Um, so something that's interesting is he almost immediately addresses the issues of empire within the text. I think it's in like the third chapter, which is like within 2 pages of the whole thing, starting off. So we have, so he has concerning. There are three kinds of principalities, and on the concerning of mixed principalities, which is ones that came by hereditary means and also by good fortune or earned through military might. And he makes this point that uh, you need to basically, if you conquer a new place, the people that you conquered are going to feel alienated and not like they're represented and stuff like that. Especially if you're ruling from a palace from a far off land, uh, it's going to be much easier for them to rebel against you. And so the best way to remedy that is to put yourself there. And then a way to remedy that on top of that is to start putting your loyal subjects there, right? Start getting. So he uses the example of the Greeks and the Turks. So when Turkey takes over Greece, moving the royal family to somewhere into Greece, maybe Athens or something like that, and then also starting to move Turks into that area. And funnily enough, we're seeing a similar thing happening right now where Turkey is trying to move uh, and immigrate into these areas as a pretext to uh, kind of shift the culture and basically say, well, it's not really Greek territory anymore; it's Turkish territory, and so therefore we're going to now absorb Greece into the fold of the Turkish Empire. And so they're basically expansion through colonization. The American or the what became America uh, and is was a British colony at one point. Getting British people over here, uh, pushing out the native populations in that area, and then slowly making that not what it used to be, but what is now basically effectively Britain, and then it became America. Obviously, Canada is another great example. Took a lot longer, kind of thing, but same basic concept. British people came over, and that one is more consistent because they didn't rebel against them. They basically Britain was just like, you're on your own, Canada, and they're like, okay, thanks, I guess. Um, and so, uh, that's why you can see when uh, um, when people in America and stuff like that, our rulers, our politicians and stuff like that, are trying to get mass immigration into America as a way to uh, they'll come up with every excuse in the book, but the real way is to control and create power. And this does it in several ways. One is to replace the native population and then have a population that can rule you. Now, the problem with this is, like, let's say Mexico, right? So a bunch of Mexicans move in, and then do you think that, like, the Nancy Pelosi types are going to be able to maintain power, or are they going to put people who are basically of that heritage into power once they get enough of a population? And so that's kind of why they want people from all over the place, so that it's so the power base is so fractionalized, and nobody can come to unity over anything, that you can't have something happen like what happened in DC on January 6th, where you had a coalition of a lot of people kind of come together and say, we want justice, we want our system to actually work for us, and be responsive to the demands of the people, and actually work in the way that it claims to function. And that's something that he touches on in Discourses is, your system of government has to govern, or it won't last. He kind of touched that on both of them, but it's very interesting. And so there is some crossover between the books, but it's far more limited than it really might appear. And so to kind of get into this, one of the ingenious things about America is this idea of a two-party system. So he touches on the Prince a lot, and a little bit in Discourses, this idea of the government constantly being overthrown and the people looking for a new, better way to govern themselves, and looking for somebody that is going to listen to them, is going to do what they actually want to do. And in America, we have this ingenious system where we overthrow the government, but we don't overthrow the government via elections, and that's with the two, the false two-party system, where it appears like there's two parties, but in reality there isn't. And so basically, you'll have the Republicans in there, and they'll basically do everything in the interest of the elites and what the ruling class wants to get done, and never respond to any of the demands of the people. And then the people will get mad, and they'll throw them out, and they'll throw them out for the only other option, which is the Democrats, which then do the exact same thing. But this kind of being able to throw out the people that you don't like kind of satiates that need to do a revolution, cause an actual full-on overthrow of the actual government, because it's kind of like it's played out in a similar manner, even though it doesn't have all the same. It works effectively the same in your mental brain, like the narrative kind of brain of your sector of your brain, but despite the fact that nothing really changes. But he even points out that a lot of times when you overthrow a prince, you swap out bad for worse. So the ruling class is usually never usually gets along with the average person, and that's why it's very important to kind of have this separation of powers, as it were, being that you have the king, the nobility, and the people, and the having this dichotomy allows the various groups to kind of, while they're continually vying for power, to kind of work out a system that works best for everybody in the end, because the king can swing between trying to please the nobility and trying to please the people. And then if the king is too tyrannical, the nobility and the people can team up to overthrow him. And it creates this power structure that is much more fluid. And I think that's one of the things that we're kind of missing in America. We're kind of getting into it with how Trump works, but we basically just have the nobility and the people, and there's not this third pillar or arm to kind of play off, to allow for each side to play off of each other and leverage and get things out of the system of government that we want to get out of it. But that's kind of touching on something else. So it's very, you basically get this idea that it's getting overthrown, and that you make things go from bad to worse. Thus, the trick is for the ruling nobility, for while the election has dissipated the revolutionary energy, it goes unnoticed that the two supposedly opposition parties are one and the same, and only when the rule of the nobility only when their rule and inability to govern reaches a peak incompetence does it reveal itself, and that's kind of what we're experiencing right now, where the uh, the government has become so corrupt, so incompetent that uh, the facade of everything's great, everything's good, uh, doesn't hide the rotting corpse behind the curtain, behind the mirror, as it were. Uh, and so, as I kind of discussed earlier, the main difference between the prince and discourses is that the prince is from the perspective of a prince and the steps that they should take to maintain and gain power. The discourses is more focused on republics and how to create and maintain functional institutions that secure the people's freedom. There certainly is some crossover, as uh, content citizens are usually not the rebellious type, but is less uh, but is less than one might think. A good example of this is in the Prince, their chapter 5. It is called Concerning the Way to Govern Cities or Principalities which lived under their own king or own laws before they were annexed. This isn't exactly out of the discourses, but an example that would line up with more of the discourses type of thinking uh, would be the perspective of how to maintain your laws and freedoms if you are conquered by an ambitious prince, right? And so that's kind of the dynamic between the two. One is you just conquered an unruly people. How do you get them to be ruly? Um, and the other is you just got conquered by a tyrant. How do you maintain your freedoms and your laws and your institutions? Um, and there is, and the advice might end up being very similar uh, from the different perspectives, but ultimately reaching the end goal that both of them are happy, because the situation in which both parties are happy with the outcome is generally the one that works out best for everybody. Um, so that's kind of what I had on the differences. I wanted to touch on one last thing with the social sexual hierarchy when it comes to Niccolò Machiavelli's works, because there's something that kind of I noticed that standed out um, as you kind of got into this is uh, it's almost like the prince's advice for gammas on how to rule, because I feel like a lot of this stuff that he talks about it might not be super obvious, but I feel like to somebody who's an alpha and stuff like that, uh, and is used to leading, it almost seems intuitive. Um, you're gonna want to do things that don't piss off your subjects, right? And because of the underhanded and backstabby nature of the gamma, this isn't obvious to them, so they have to be told. Um, but I think it's useful either way. So let me go through what I have written here. It is interesting that the teachings of the prince into the it is interesting to put the teachings of the prince into the social sexual hierarchy. For Machiavelli points out that those who gain their positions as princes by feat of arms have a much more secure principality than those who were gifted it or used uh, the generalship of others to gain that position. This goes back to the idea of the alpha must prove his worth as a leader, and that being gifted the spot of alpha effectively, or leader, I should say, leaves many questions if you are fit to be in that position. This fear is certainly warranted, as the likelihood of someone being appointed to lead and/or someone who does not lead on the battle uh, and/or is someone who does not lead on the battlefield has a much higher chance of not being suited to the task, while the one who comes up on their own merits has gone through the self-selecting process, which those unfit for the role were naturally weeded out of. uh, he is also considered how the gamma might rise to power, in the classic gamma fashion of backstabbing those who see you as a friend. And when I say backstabbing, I mean it in the literal terms, as both examples he gives were of lowly people who thought they deserved better. And uh, to this end, they befriended magistrates, gathered them in one place, and then slaughtered them all with their troops. Now, one thing that breaks this for me is these men breaks these men from a typical gamma is that they have some people who are loyal to them because they had soldiers work with them to do this deception. Uh, or they would not be able to pull off these executions slash assassinations. It could be that those loyal to him were part of a gamma hive, but den of backstabbers and thieves is not who I would want to trust with a plan like this. As at the soonest opportunity, they themselves will backstab you, and so the overall structure of the system is very unstable. However, if the system only needed to last a small while, it could work, and then those who put you in power would have to be disposed of. Think kind of long night of not the night of long knives in Nazi Germany. After basically Hitler got into power, he disposed of all the brown shirts. The Gestapo, or not Gestapo, but a lot of the people that got the communists into power in Russia, a very similar thing to happen to them in the pogroms. Uh, this leaves you in a very precarious situation of not having lots of allies around you, leading to a potential easy overthrow of your principality you just established. Um, and this is an issue that Machiavelli brings up in The Prince, where you need to, if you're going to get, or actually it brings it up in Discourses, where somebody basically got into power, and then the instant they got into power, they kind of tore the mask off the second they got there and backstabbed everybody that got them there. And he's like, you didn't give enough time to build up new friends in which they they would be able to support you, so that when you no longer had the support of the original people that got you there, um, you would have this new base and power structure to be able to keep yourself in power. And so he lost power almost immediately, and that is a classic Gamma move of just thinking that you can do whatever you want whenever you want because you're the one with the power. And where power is a much more precarious thing that people uh, give it credit for, I guess. It seems the issue that Machiavelli writes about are best addressed to Gamma, best addressed to Gamma rules than anyone else, as those who understand their proper place within the hierarchy don't have this issue in general. Um, so yeah, it's kind of interesting. And well, I guess in the example from Discourses, the guy didn't need to backstab everyone. It was really weird. Um, and he used the example from the Decemvirites of Rome that basically got themselves into power, and this guy was super charismatic and got into power, and then the instant he got the power and got everything, he turned on everybody. And it's like, that's so the instant that he did that, now all of a sudden the nobility and the people had a reason to unite against him. They united against him, kicked him out, and had their institutions restored because they had dissolved in Romans instance. They had dissolved the tribunes, which was the way for the plebs to air their grievances, and they also dissolved the consuls, which were the ultimate power positions the uh, for the nobility. So both those got dissolved. The nobility was happy with the consuls being or the tribunes being dissolved. They didn't want the consuls dissolved, and the plebs wanted the consul dissolved, and they didn't want the tribunes dissolved. So they were kind of both upset about that. But basically, what happened is uh, when he backstabbed literally everybody to the point that he had zero allies, they both kind of were like, all right, fine, we don't like the consuls, and you don't like the tribunes, but they're better than this guy. And then they kicked him out, and then they put all those institutions back in, which ended up being pretty overall for Rome's history. They were pretty good at maintaining Rome's freedom and worked pretty well for its people. So kind of interesting how that all plays out. Uh, that's all I really have on this topic. Kind of interesting. It wasn't so much a comparison of uh, the Prince versus the Discourses, more observations from both of them. But I thought it was worth bringing up, and I highly recommend both of the books. I don't. The translation I have of Machiavelli's The Prince, I'm not a fan of personally. I just have a hard time reading it for some reason. But the translation I got of the Discourses is fantastic. It's very easy to read. Doesn't feel like it's translated from another language. Very great. And it's the one I have on Discourses is called The Sweetness of Power, and it has his Discourses and Guccigani's Considerations, which I believe is a reflection of the Discourses, but I haven't gotten to that yet. And it was translated by James B. Atkinson and David Seiss. So if you're looking for it, there you go. You can go try to find that. Um, but that's kind of the perspective, or that's what I have on that. Thank you guys for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, whether you're on BitChute or YouTube or Podbean. I appreciate it all. Thank you guys for, watching the videos and downloading the podcast and all that. It all helps. It all, you know, it makes it so I'm not just a random person screaming into a microphone. So that's all cool. Anyway, hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you guys Monday.